Welcome to Pause TV, the television show of the Pateo Academia for Holy Science. My name is Johan Oldenkamp, and in this second episode of Pause TV, we're going to talk about the blooper of gravity. If you have not seen the first episode of Pause TV, then go to this website, pateo.nl, and click on More. And there you will see the logo of Pause TV, and there you can find episode 1. Because I think it's very important that you have first seen episode 1 before you see this second one. So please watch these videos in the chronological order. So in this episode we're going to talk about the major blooper of scientism. Scientism is the university-based belief in all kinds of dogmas. And the biggest blooper of scientism is gravity, as we will see in this episode. I'll switch off my camera now. Of course, this is not to scale, but the question here is, how do all these gigantic heavenly bodies stay in their orbit? They go around like a clockwork. How is that possible? So we have a huge celestial body in the center, and around it goes our home planets. And there's also a gigantic planet a little bit further on. And there is another satellite of our planet going around as well. How is this all possible? Well, scientism claims that it has to do with this formula. It's a kind of constant, and then the masses of both heavenly bodies multiplied, divided by the square of the distance. This is, according to scientism, the reason why all these heavenly bodies stay in their orbits. Well, let us examine how correct this is. Yeah, we live on this planet. I call her Terra, and there is a satellite called Luna, the moon, going around her. And people think that high tide and low tide are caused by the attraction of Luna. Well, that's a little bit strange story, because the attraction the other way around makes Luna stay in her orbit. At least that's what we're told. And we see now that when Luna is on the makes a right angle with the line from the sun Helios, then indeed the high tide is, the low tide is not as low. Low tide is a little bit higher. But the main axis here is the line going straight to the sun Helios, because there we find high tide. High tide is always here, and low tide is always here. And since we go around in 24 hours, more or less, we have twice high tide and twice low tide. That's the main reason. But when Luna is aligned with Helios, as you can see here on this side, then we can see that high tide is much higher. And when Luna is on the other side, so in the same direction as where Helios is, then it is even bigger. But even here already, you see here's big high tide, while the moon is on the other side. So never say that high tide and low tide are caused by the moon, or the attraction force by the moon. That's all nonsense. Yeah, the sun, Helios, has the biggest effect. So Luna is going round and around and around, but in the same time as Luna is going around our home planet Terra, Terra is also making her orbit around Helios. So it's double dynamics, if you like. And the main question is, why is Luna in her orbit? Well, the answer is there is an attraction force. Yeah, the gravity, that's the answer by scientism. The gravity force from Terra keeps Luna in her orbit. Well, let us apply then this so-called science of the universities to what is really going on here. Yeah, we have this formula, and we know the masses and we know the distances. Well, we know the masses. Actually, these masses have never been really weighed. How can you weigh a planet? That's a little bit tricky, isn't it? So it's all calculated, but we'll skip that. We'll just use the masses and the distance that are accepted by scientism. So these are the masses, and these are the distances. Yeah, the average distance, but that's also too much detail. Just focus on the big picture here. So what do we get when we use these masses and these distances and we put them in the formula? Well, let us say that the attraction force, the so-called attraction force, calculated by this formula, between Luna and Terra is 1. How big do you think then is the attraction force of Helios to Luna? You can calculate this. You can stop this video now, put it on pause, take your calculator and fill it in. What is the answer? Well, if this attraction force is bigger than 1, then we can conclude that Helios is pulling harder to Luna than Terra is. So if there is something coming out of this formula bigger than 1, then major university science has a major problem. And the correct answer is 2.2. That means the Sun Helios is pulling more than twice as hard on Luna than Terra is. Which means that it is completely impossible for Luna to stay in her orbit, because this pull is more than twice as strong. Can you see this? So this formula proves that this formula is wrong, because Luna is in her orbit and she's not pulled away, which should have been according to this calculation. If you want to have a good laugh, then ask your science professor, or maybe your professor of physics or astrophysics, doesn't really matter, anyone who thinks that science, university science, is correct, ask them to explain this. And then you will indeed have a good laugh, because they come up with all kinds of nonsense. All kinds of nonsense in order to confuse you. But if you stay focused, focus on this, then you know this formula is absolutely wrong. So this shows the biggest blooper of scientism, namely gravity. Very, very wrong. And we have this formula because it was invented by this man, Isaac Newton. And I don't doubt his good intentions, to be honest. I think he really wanted to explain, and he explained a lot of things as well, in a good way, but here he went completely wrong. But because he went wrong, and it was accepted by the mainstream scientific community, it became a belief system, because now they all believe in gravity. Well, gravity does not exist, at least not on that scale in the universe. It's actually an effect within a magnetic field, but that's something out of scope of this presentation. I'm now focusing on gravity is not the force that keeps the planets in their orbits. And this formula, invented by Isaac Newton, looks remarkably the same to this formula. And this formula was created by Mr. Coulomb, Charles-Augustin de Coulomb. And it's the force of electrostatic, or the electrostatic force. And of course you can see these formulas are identical. Yeah, here they talk about masses, but here we talk about charges. But it's the same idea. You have to multiply a feature of what is involved, and you divide that by the square of the distance. And next you multiply it with a kind of constant. So it's the very same idea. And this proves that it is not really gravity. Yeah, it is not gravity at all. It is more an electromagnetic force. But because university science, named scientism, a belief system, is so attached to the idea of gravity that it all must be gravity, it became a gravity-based religion. And that gravity-based religion, yeah, became completely insane. Because next, all kinds of things were invented, like massless particles known as gravitons. They are the ones that bring the force of gravity upon bodies. Well, that's ridiculous, of course. And of course, black holes, dark matter, dark energy, neutron stars, and you can go on, you can read the list for yourself. This is all invented to keep the lie of gravity alive. But if you skip gravity as the main force that keeps the heavenly bodies in their orbits, then you can forget about all this nonsense. And the world becomes much more clearer. Because the truth is, it is not gravity, it is electric. The electricity, or the electric force, keeps everything together. And it works together with the magnetic force. So it's an electromagnetic reality we live in. Period. Gravity has nothing to do with the celestial bodies. And this is not only true in the macro world, in the universe, but also in the micro world. Because the electromagnetic force is more than 10 to the power 36 times stronger than the effect known as gravity. So what are we talking about? Forget gravity and focus on electricity. That is what you need to do in order to reach out to science. Universities have to forget about all the nonsense. Because what they are teaching now is science fiction. It has nothing to do with genuine science. It's all a belief system based on gravity. While gravity is a myth. So what can we do? We can study holy science. And just as to give you an idea of the power of holy science, I'm going to give you a few examples. But do not think that after seeing this, you know what holy science is. It just is a demonstration of its power. Holy science tells us that the world actually is a unity of three worlds. The world that we perceive with our senses is the shadow world, the outer world. But there is a world on the other side of the veil called the proto world. And there is also an original world, the source world. And those three worlds together create what we call reality. But Plato explained it very good, I think, that we are like prisoners. We are sitting here and our senses can only tell us about the shadow world. Our senses have no idea that there is something more, something behind our back, so to say, something on the other side of the veil. The source world has but one dimension. It's the world of all possibilities. And the possibilities can be seen as a range from which it is possible. While the second world, the proto world, is the world of everything that is intangible. Yeah, for instance, time itself. Yeah, it's getting lighter and it's getting darker, more light or whatever. Yeah, like energy. So it has a dimension of value and a dimension of progress, if you like. So the proto world has two dimensions, while the shadow world that we can perceive with our senses has three dimensions. This is very essential to understand. 1, 2, and 3 are the worlds, but these are also the dimensions. One-dimensional source world, two-dimensional proto world, and three-dimensional shadow world. And there's much more to say about these worlds. The third world, the shadow world, is the world where we find quantities and we can measure it objectively. While the second world, the proto world, is a world of qualities and we can only measure it subjectively. And the first world is the world of essentialities. And you can then determine something in an absolute way. Yeah, most people have no idea that there is a first world as well. I'm not going to explain everything here, but this is the key in order to understand our reality. The unity of three wills, or you can also call it the Trinity. So what does it all mean? Well, it means that the second world, the proto world, in order to understand it, it has two dimensions, so that means to the power 2, yeah, to the second power. And the physical world, the shadow world, is to the third power. Yeah, that's the essence. What does it mean to the second power? It means something intangible times something intangible. That's the proto world. And in the shadow worlds, it is something physical times something physical times something physical. Maybe this is all too abstract for you now, but it will come clear why I do this very soon. Where is energy? Do you think energy is in the first world, or in the second, or in the third world? Please make up your mind. Energy is not physical. You cannot touch it. Yeah? You cannot grab it. So it must be intangible. Yeah? And it is not a possibility because it's already there. So it must be here. And that's true. Energy is in the second world. So that's where energy is. So that means that energy times something intangible times something intangible, or times intangible to the power 2, equals something physical times something physical times something physical, or physical to the power 3. That is the formula we can derive from all this, meaning that energy is something physical to the power 3 divided by something intangible to the power 2. Now we know this. Now let us look at some formula created by physics. The first one is about kinetic energy. Now what do we know about kinetic energy? Well, we know it's half of the mass. To me, this is always a bit striking why it is half of the mass, but we'll skip also that, times the velocity squared. So velocity times velocity, and that times half of the mass. That's the amount of kinetic energy. That's the formula. Yeah, I'll put it more elegantly. This is the one we've all learned at high school. That means kinetic energy is a half times the mass times distance divided by duration, and that to the power 2. Yeah, because velocity is distance divided by duration. But it has to be squared. So this whole thing has to be squared. And what do we get then? We get something physical times something physical times something physical, because twice distance, distance times mass. That's on top. And below we get duration times duration is something intangible to the power 2. So this shows this is true. Second example. We all know this. Force is mass times acceleration. So what does it mean? Yeah, force can be one force, but it can also be a vector sum of all forces. Doesn't matter here. But if we want to know the energy, we need to multiply this force with the distance. Yeah, the distance during which this force was applied. Meaning energy is distance times mass times acceleration. Meaning energy is distance times mass times distance divided by duration square, because that's acceleration. Yeah, distance times duration squared. That's the acceleration. Meaning physical to the power 3 divided by intangible to the power 2. Another clear demonstration of the power of holy science. And to make it complete, I'll give you a third one. And that's based on the genius scientist named Johannes Kepler. If we have listened carefully to what he said, we would not have felt in the mistake that Isaac Newton made. Because Kepler was still on the right track. But since Newton, scientism went very wrong. And if you want to learn more about Johannes Kepler, you can go to holyscience.nl. Then you click on Patheopedia, and next you click on Holy Science Way Showers, because he is one of those genius way showers. So what did Kepler tell us? Well, he came up with three so-called laws, or regularities. This is the first one. I'm not going to explain it here. This is the second one, and has to do with the surface of each area and the time that is in between these two blue dots. And if the surface area is the same, the time is also the same. I'm not going to explain that one either, but these are the first two so-called laws. But the third law is a clear demonstration again, because it is the semi-major axis to the power of 3. Yeah, that's something physical times something physical times something physical, divided by the orbital period, and that's squared. And then, I put it in a formula. Of course, scientism does not know this formula, but the E is, of course, energy, and the J is a constant named after Johannes Kepler. And of course, we'll see here again something physical to the power 3 divided by something intangible to the power 2. Three clear demonstrations of the power of holy science. Please break free from the belief system named scientism and continue doing real science. But the main question here is, are you ready for holy science? If you want to learn more about holy science, then watch the first episode of Pause TV. Coming up next in Pause TV is the second major blooper of scientism, and that's the blooper of evolution. If you want to make sure you will not miss this one, then subscribe to this YouTube channel. Simply click on subscribe under this video, or you can connect with me via other social media as well. For now, I thank you very much for watching this video.